"You'll die soon anyway," Victor said, barely glancing up from his phone. Sylvia, my daughter-in-law, sipped her tea quietly, not meeting my eyes. There was a strange tension in the room, thick and suffocating. Andrew, my son, shifted uncomfortably in his chair but didn't speak. The clock on the wall ticked, louder than it ever had before, as if it were counting down to something inevitable. I had heard plenty of cruel words in my time, but this one, coming from my own son, cut deeper than I ever expected. I smiled, though my hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the sting of what I knew had been said not just for the moment, but for years. As if my life and all the memories contained within these walls were nothing more than a problem to be solved. "You don't need to worry about me," I said calmly, folding my hands in my lap. The words were measured, almost too controlled, but I had learned over the years to mask the hurt with quiet strength. Andrew didn't look at me, his gaze shifting around the room as if he didn't quite know where to rest. "We're just trying to think practically, Mom," he said, his voice soft but laced with impatience. "You're getting older. The house is too much for you." "The house is fine," I replied, trying not to let the frustration leak into my voice. "I manage." "You've always managed, but it's getting harder," Victor added, his tone far too clinical, as if I were an issue to be managed, not a mother to be listened to. There was a moment of silence. Sylvia, ever the observer, stared into her cup, not saying a word. I could feel her distance in the air. Her unease was tangible. I could see it in the way she held her cup, the way she shifted in her seat. They had all made their decisions about me long ago, but I wasn't about to let them decide this for me. I looked around the room. The furniture I had carefully chosen, the knickknacks I had collected over the years, the pictures on the walls. Every corner of this house held memories, each one a fragment of the life Richard and I had built together. The kitchen table where we'd sat with our children, the cabinet where we kept the china from our wedding, the hallway where we'd measured our son's heights. This house wasn't just a structure. It was a living memory of everything we had shared, everything we had lost. Victor's voice interrupted my thoughts. "Mom, we've been talking. Andrew and I both think it's time for you to consider moving somewhere smaller. Maybe somewhere easier to manage. It's not just the house, it's your safety, Mom. The stairs, the garden, the plumbing. It's just too much for you." I looked at him, my heart heavy. Too much for me. They all thought I couldn't handle it. I wasn't the same woman I used to be. I knew that. But I wasn't so far gone that I didn't know what was happening. "I don't need anyone to make decisions for me," I said, my voice steady. "I'm perfectly capable of looking after myself." "Mom," Andrew said quietly, his gaze flicking to Victor as if seeking approval, "we're just trying to do what's best for you. You've been alone here for so long, and it's not safe anymore. Maybe it's time to think about what's next." I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't just about the house, it was about me. They were offering to take care of me, to step in and make decisions. They thought I wouldn't understand. They thought I wouldn't mind. But what they didn't realize was that I had made my life here, and I wasn't ready to give that up. Not just yet. "I'm not leaving," I said firmly, rising from the table and beginning to clear the dishes. The pie I had baked for the occasion sat untouched, a sad reminder of the hollowness of the conversation. "I'm perfectly fine. I don't need a new place to live." Victor's face hardened slightly, but his voice remained calm. "It's not about what you want. It's about what's best for you. We're just trying to help." But I wasn't asking for help, not like this. Not for my life to be controlled by their idea of what I needed. I had lived in this house for over 40 years, raised my children here, built a life with Richard, and I wasn't about to give that up just because they thought it was time for me to move on. I could feel my hands trembling, but I didn't let it show. I kept my back turned, focused on putting the dishes away, as if the action could somehow shield me from the words that kept coming. They finished their coffee, made small talk about plans for the weekend, and then, as always, they left. No more words of concern, no more offers to help. They were gone, just as quickly as they had come, leaving the house even quieter than it had been before. Later that evening, I sat in the kitchen, staring out the window into the garden. The rose bushes Richard had planted were beginning to wither for the season, but I didn't mind. I could still hear his voice in the rustling of the leaves, see his hands as he pruned the branches just the way he had taught me. I had always prided myself on being independent, on standing on my own 2 feet. But now, with Richard gone, and my children treating me as though I were already fading away, I wondered how much longer I could keep pretending everything was fine. It wasn't just about the house. It was about dignity, about holding on to something that mattered, something that proved I was still here, still alive, still able to make decisions about my life. The truth was, I wasn't ready to give up this house, not yet. But there was something else I had to confront, the way they had all stopped seeing me, the way I had allowed myself to be invisible, to shrink into the background while they made the decisions for me. I had spent years letting others dictate my life, doing what was expected, what was needed. But I was done. It was time to take control again. I got up slowly and walked to the small desk where Richard had kept his papers. I pulled out the drawer and found the envelope with the will inside. I held it in my hands, the paper cold and unfamiliar, like something from a different time. Richard and I had written this will years ago, back when things were simpler, but things had changed. I had changed. I sat at the desk, staring at the envelope for a long time before opening it. I read the words that had been written so long ago. The house was to be split evenly between Andrew and Victor. It was simple, it made sense, but now it didn't feel right anymore. I didn't want them to have it, not like this, not without understanding. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew what I had to do. I reached for the phone. The next morning, I found myself standing in the hallway, my hands resting lightly on the old oak banister. The house was quiet, and it felt heavier than it had before. As I stared at the pictures lining the wall, my mind kept drifting back to Victor's words. "You'll die soon anyway." It wasn't just what he said, but how he said it, as though I were already a ghost, as if my life had already been written off. But it wasn't, and I wasn't going to let them write it for me. The will sat on the desk in the other room, untouched. The decision was made. I needed to change it, to take control of what little I had left of my life. I had thought about it all night, the way they had looked at me, the way they had tried to tell me what I needed, what was best for me. But I had always been strong. I had always been the one who held things together when Richard passed, who raised my children alone after he was gone. I had been the one to handle everything when the house started to fall apart after years of wear and tear. But now it wasn't just about the house. It was about respect, and I wasn't going to be disrespected anymore, not by my children, not by anyone. I couldn't give it to Andrew and Victor. They didn't understand. They never had. I pulled on my coat and walked out the door, my breath fogging up in the cold air. The first frost of the season had come early this year, and the grass was coated with a thin layer of ice. I made my way down the path toward the small law office tucked between the bakery and the laundromat. The familiar bell above the door jingled when I entered, and the receptionist, a young woman with short blonde hair, looked up from her computer. "Mrs. Marshall," she said with a smile. "Good to see you. Mr. Hayward is expecting you." I nodded and followed her down the narrow hallway to his office. The air smelled faintly of dust and coffee. Mr. Hayward stood when I entered, his gray hair a bit more unruly than usual. He had a kind face, one that had seen many things, and I felt a brief flash of relief as I sat down across from him. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Marshall?" he asked, settling into his chair. I didn't waste time. "I need to update my will," I said, my voice firm. "I want to leave the house to someone else." Mr. Hayward looked at me, eyebrows raised. "Someone else? I thought you had intended for it to go to Andrew and Victor." "I've changed my mind," I replied. "I don't want them to have it. I want it to go to someone who will respect it, someone who knows what this house means." He leaned forward, his fingers tapping lightly on his desk. "And who would that be?" "Jeremy Lawson," I said. The name felt right on my tongue, though I hadn't said it aloud in a long time. Jeremy, my neighbor. He had been nothing but kind to me. No motives, no expectations, just a man who had given me help when I needed it and treated me like a person, not an inconvenience. Mr. Hayward paused for a moment, his eyes assessing me. Jeremy Lawson, are you sure about this, Mrs. Marshall? He's a good man, but he's not my son. Is that what you're thinking? I asked, cutting him off. He didn't answer, but I could see the concern in his eyes. He was right to be concerned. People would talk, but this wasn't about what people thought. It was about what I wanted, what I needed. I'm sure, I said quietly. He's been more of a son to me than either of my children have been in years. He doesn't ask for anything. He just helps, and that's all I want. Mr. Hayward nodded slowly, scribbling a few notes on a piece of paper. Very well, he said. I'll draw up the new paperwork. We'll need 2 witnesses when you sign it. The process will be simple. I felt the weight of the decision settle on my shoulders, but in a good way. A weight that felt like freedom, like I was finally doing something for myself after all these years. When I returned home, the house felt different. It was as if I could feel the walls breathing around me, and I found myself walking through each room more slowly than usual. The living room, where Richard and I had sat for so many years, now seemed quieter, more empty. The memories felt heavier than they ever had before, but I didn't let them drag me down. I had made a choice. I had chosen myself. I stood by the window in the kitchen, watching Jeremy across the street. He was outside, trimming the hedges, his movements slow but deliberate. He had always done things with care. Always. I wondered how he would feel when I told him. I hadn't planned on telling him right away, but I couldn't keep it from him forever. He deserved to know. And yet, I didn't want to make it a big thing. He wasn't the type to ask for anything, much less a house. But I knew he would take care of it. He would love it the way Richard had. He would respect it. I was just about to pour myself a cup of tea when the doorbell rang. I hadn't been expecting anyone. When I opened the door, there stood Jeremy, a shy smile on his face as he held out a small brown paper bag. Just thought you might like some of my homemade jam, he said, his voice low but kind. Made too much, as usual. Hope it's not a bother. I took the bag from him, smiling. You're always so kind, Jeremy. Thank you. You're welcome, he said, stepping back slightly. Just wanted to make sure you're doing all right. I nodded. I'm fine, just taking it one day at a time. I hesitated for a moment, then added, Actually, there's something I've been meaning to tell you. Jeremy tilted his head, waiting for me to continue. I've made some changes to my will, I said slowly. I've decided to leave the house to you. His eyes widened slightly in surprise, but he didn't say anything right away. I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to process my words. You sure about that? He asked quietly. I mean, I appreciate it, but I don't want to make things complicated. I shook my head, feeling a warmth spread through me. No complications. You've always been there for me, Jeremy, and I want you to have it. You've earned it, more than anyone else. He didn't argue, didn't try to refuse. Instead, he just smiled, a small, genuine smile. Thank you, Gladys. I'll take care of it, I promise. I placed the bag of jam on the counter and walked him to the door. Before he left, he put a hand on my shoulder, a simple gesture, but one that carried more meaning than he could have known. If you ever need anything, you know where I am. I know, I said softly. Thank you. After Jeremy left, I sat down at the kitchen table, the weight of the decision beginning to settle into my bones. It wasn't about the house anymore. It wasn't about what I was leaving behind. It was about who I was leaving it to. Someone who had shown me nothing but respect. Someone who understood that this house, this life, meant more than just a place to live. It was a part of me, a part of Richard. And Jeremy would see that. I felt a small sense of relief, something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The future, whatever it held, was mine to decide. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with that. The morning after Jeremy left, the house felt quieter than usual. The air outside had taken on a colder edge, the first true signs of winter creeping in. I stood by the window, watching the frost creep across the lawn, turning the grass silver in the early light. I could feel the change in the air, the shift in my own heart. I had made my decision. The house, once so full of life, would soon belong to someone who truly understood its worth. It wasn't about the bricks or the mortar. It wasn't about the land or the walls that had witnessed so much laughter, so much sorrow. It was about the history I had lived here, the life I had built with Richard. It was about how every creaking floorboard, every peeling bit of wallpaper told the story of us. And I was finally letting go of it, not because I had to, but because I chose to. The phone rang just as I was setting the kettle on the stove. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to answer. "Hello?" "Mom, it's me, Andrew." I sighed, steadying myself. I had known this was coming. It was only a matter of time before he reached out, though I didn't expect it to be so soon. His voice had the same tone it always did, like he was walking on eggshells, unsure of how to approach me. "How are you?" he asked, though I could hear the hesitance in his voice. "I'm fine," I replied, keeping the tone neutral. "What's on your mind?" There was a pause, followed by the faint sound of him shifting in his chair. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice softer now, "about the conversation we had the other day, about the house." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the silence stretch between us. There was no point in pretending everything was fine. I knew where this was heading. "I've made my decision, Andrew," I said firmly. "I'm not selling the house. I'm not moving." "What do you mean, you're not moving?" His voice rose, and I could tell he was taken aback. "Mom, we've talked about this. It's not safe for you to be alone here. It's too much for you to manage." I shook my head, though I knew he couldn't see me. "I've been managing just fine, Andrew. It's not about what you think is best for me. It's about what I want. I'm not going anywhere." There was a long silence on the other end, and for a moment I thought he had hung up. But then he spoke, his voice tight. "Then what do you want, Mom?" he asked. "What are you going to do with the house when you're gone?" The question hung in the air like a weight I hadn't expected. What was I going to do with the house? I had been asking myself that very question for days now, and the answer was clearer than ever. I wasn't going to give it to him. Not to Victor either. I wasn't going to let them treat this home like something to be bought and sold. This house deserved more than that. "I've decided to leave the house to someone who understands its value," I said softly. "Someone who knows what it means. I've already made arrangements." "What?" Andrew's voice cracked slightly, disbelief creeping in. "You've already made arrangements? Without telling us?" I could feel my pulse quicken, but I forced myself to remain calm. "I didn't have to tell you. It's my decision to make. This house belongs to me, and I'm choosing to leave it to someone who has shown me respect, someone who's always been there when I needed help, without asking for anything in return." There was a stunned silence, followed by the sound of Andrew exhaling sharply. "Who?" he asked, his tone flat, almost accusing. "Jeremy," I replied, "my neighbor." Andrew's laughter, harsh and bitter, echoed through the phone. "Jeremy, are you serious? You're leaving the house to him?" I let the silence stretch out between us again, feeling my heart heavy with the weight of his disbelief. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "He's been kind to me, Andrew. He's never treated me like a burden. He doesn't see this house as something to be sold for profit. He sees it for what it is, my home, and that's why I've chosen him." "You're making a huge mistake," Andrew said, his voice tinged with frustration. "You can't just give the house away to someone who isn't even family." "But I can," I said quietly. "I can, because this is my life, Andrew. And I'm not going to let you or Victor decide how it ends." There was another pause, longer this time. "I don't understand, Mom," he finally said, his voice softer now, as if the fight had drained out of him. "Why can't we just do what's best for you?" I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of sadness wash over me. What's best for me, Andrew, is not being treated like I'm already gone. It's about making the choices that feel right for me. Not what you think is best, but what I know is best. I waited for a response, but none came. I could almost hear him wrestling with my words, trying to process what I was saying. Finally, he spoke again, quieter this time. I don't agree with you, but I guess I'll respect your decision. Thank you, I said, though I wasn't sure if he truly meant it. That's all I ask. We said our goodbyes shortly after, and I hung up the phone, my hands trembling slightly. It wasn't easy, this conversation. I had hoped for something more, but I knew I couldn't expect them to understand. Not now, not after everything that had happened. I had made my decision, and I couldn't take it back. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the trees, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the world outside. The street was quiet, the leaves rustling in the wind, and I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. It wasn't because I had everything figured out. It wasn't because I had found some grand resolution. It was simply because I had made the choice to live life on my own terms. Jeremy was outside again, working in his garden. He waved as he always did, and I waved back. There was something reassuring about that simple gesture, something steady and kind in a world that felt like it was always shifting beneath my feet. I hadn't told him yet, but I would. I would tell him soon, and I would make sure he understood that this wasn't a mistake. This was my gift to him, the only way I knew how to show my gratitude. That evening, after the house had settled into its usual quiet, I wrote a letter to my grandchildren. I didn't know if they would ever understand my decision, but I hoped one day they would. I wrote about what the house had meant to me, about how it had been a place of love and growth. I told them that I had chosen to give it to Jeremy, not because he was family, but because he had shown me more respect than my own children ever had. And I hoped they would remember that, above all else, the house was more than just a building. It was a home. The next morning, I found myself standing at Jeremy's door. My heart beat a little faster than usual, but I knew this was the right thing to do. He answered almost immediately, his kind face lighting up when he saw me. "Gladys," he said, his voice warm. "What's going on? Everything all right?" I stepped inside, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on me. "Jeremy, I have something important to tell you," I began, and he gave me his full attention, that same quiet respect in his eyes.